Welcome to another episode of Responsible AI in Action. I'm your host, Charles Dimov, CMO of Cama.ai, the leader in responsible AI technology. With me today is Adrian Hull, CEO of Locadium. Welcome, Adrian. Adrian leads a data and AI transformation consultancy focused on governance, integration, and analytics implementation. Locadium helps organizations build AI-ready data foundations and aligns responsible AI with measurable business outcomes. They work across industries like the energy sector, healthcare, financial services, retail, logistics. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you, Charles. Looking forward to the chat.
Yes, absolutely. And that's an impressive portfolio that Locadium has, which is great. So you've got lots of experience in this area, which is wonderful. Adrian, let's dive right in here. So I'm going to start with my first question. First question is really about governance. Why is governance foundational to enterprise technology? And beyond that, why does AI make it non-negotiable? Because these days you absolutely seem to have a governance structure. Why?
Well, that's a good question. I'm gonna laugh a little bit at that question because I've been in technology for about 36 years. Yeah. And the first 33 years, governance was something that you didn't say. It was, and I'll go into the details of what's changed in this space. But basically, if you look at it, first of all, let's define what governance is. It's a broad topic. But how it relates to AI is you look at it through the lens of data. So data is about the right data going to the right people in the right time. So those are the goals that you're trying to accomplish with the movement of data. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the preceding 33 years, so the first part of your question, two-part question, is how is governance foundational? So foundational because you do need measuring sticks, you do need guardrails to get successful outcomes. But governance is one of those things like we do with everything in our life. We measure risk and what is the cost of mitigation. So anybody that's done a lot of delivery, as I have in the past, we know that, and this is why I'm kind of smirking at the question, because it's like finally the topic of governance is that when you're doing delivery projects and delivering either initiatives or even the operations of a company, you're advocating as a project manager, program manager, or an operations leader. You're arguing for budget to put towards governance. Mm-hmm. And historically, that's been on the chopping block because there's never enough money for the projects. So there's three things that dropped off in the past. It's governance. The other one would be quality assurance. The other one is handover to operations, like documentation to close that off neatly and hand it off to operations. Going back to governance, the reason why, for good reason, and I would argue the opposite side of it, the real reason it did get chopped back is kind of goes to your second part of the question of non-negotiable in the space of AI. First 33 years, very negotiable because you're measuring risk and cost of mitigating it. So to answer that more completely, why now in AI is that the technology shift is much different with AI. And it's understanding what AI is compared to the previous technology. Mm-hmm. So the first 33 years, it kind of seems like it was growing, technology was changing. But then if you ever look at a graph of technology change, AI and adoption of it, now that the acceleration of pace, like if you're not reading on AI every day, you're probably out of date in some ways, right? Mm-hmm. But it's what fundamentally AI is doing. So in the technology in the preceding 33 years of my career was very much you'd have a system, a solution, software. It grabs from a source, data, and then essentially moves it over to where it's displayed, a dashboard or a screen somewhere. It aggregates the data, but it keeps it whole. The data over there and the source is the same as what's displayed. The risks are much lower. Mm-hmm. Now with AI, the whole model, which is important to understand how AI works, it works on probability. So there's no certainty anymore. You're injecting an element of uncertainty. Now, to keep it simplistic, AI is very complex, but it's not just a one decision. It's raining outside today, therefore bring an umbrella. It's pulling in streams of data from multiple thousands and thousands of sources. And it's doing interpretation based on probability. So when you inject that, and if it gets off on its wrong path, you now have a problem where governance is a real issue that you have to inject because you have things like that's leading the way, like the EU AI Act, for instance, that's putting in stipulations on companies and that they are responsible for the output that they deliver out to the community, to their shareholders, their stakeholders. So if you're not giving the right information and it's generated from AI, you're still liable for that information. You're seeing that around the world. There's hefty lawsuits that are happening. Some of them by big consultancy companies getting fined substantially just by giving out the wrong answer, not validating it. So I think we'll probably get into some of these later on in the questions, but
Yeah.
we get into responsible AI. But that's kind of speaking to your question about why
Mhm.
now governance is so
Mhm.
important,
Mhm.
because going back to risk reward or risk value, right now the cost of actual something bad happening from an AI outcome is actually substantial. And the
Yeah.
cost of doing the governance is relatively inexpensive. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
the answer to that question.
It's a little bit time consuming, perhaps, but you're absolutely right. And frankly, I think you kind of hit on it in terms of the AI speed. The fact that we're going so fast means that, yeah, if something's going to mess up or kind of blow up or something, it's going to do it fast, which is actually just ups the pressure on everything. So I do kind of agree with you that, yeah, that actually totally explains why governance is becoming a hot topic these days, is to mitigate that type of risk and kind of step away from it. Excellent. Thank you.
100%.
So, next question for you, Adrian. I'm going to kind of dip into a little bit of your experience here on this one. So, you've seen a lot of organizations, and you've seen a lot of organizations are now treating AI as if it's a silver bullet, right? That this is
Mhm.
the thing. We just need to kind of deploy AI, and it's going to fix all of our problems. Even if nobody expressly says that, that's almost like the underlying tone, right? And just about everyone is getting into it, right? Of course. Now, in your experience, what does that type of mindset, how does that type of mindset typically break down, or
Yeah,
does it?
that's another excellent question, because it combines a lot of things going on in the industry right now, some rightfully
Mm-hmm.
so, some unfortunately so. So,
Mm-hmm.
in order for AI to be getting adoption, but it's a different type of technology. It requires a huge amount of data to be able to operate at scale. And so the AI companies really need to get the consumers, the people behind their product. And that's why you see the battle of Gemini and ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
Claude. So there's they're presenting in a way of look at what can be done with AI. But if you look at how it's being used, it's working off, the large language model that we're seeing, but also if a huge data stored out there of the internet, it's bringing things in. When
Yes.
you use it,
Yes.
or I use it for personal reasons, we're able to see, you look at the output and say, oh, I like that answer. And we probably have a high degree of acceptability for us for what we would accept from the AI coming back. The difference is that to work in a corporate environment is much different, is much, much different. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't have error, you can't have this hallucinations that many people that
Yes.
have heard about and they've experienced too, usually when they're doing
Yep.
visuals or things like that from generative AI. You can't have that in a corporate setting, not when you're dealing with legal affairs, et cetera, things like that. So why the shiny object, going to your specific question? And to be fair on this one, I'm seeing less of it now through the leaders and
Mm-hmm.
executives, and I'll explain
Mm-hmm.
why,
Mm-hmm.
but there still is the silver bullet marketing part that comes out that
Yes.
put this in, put an AI agent in, put this AI software in, and it will solve everything. But we go back as a company in Locadium, we look at the three pillars. They're not our three pillars, they're general
Yeah.
consulting, but the three pillars look at the legs of the stool. And if any of those pillars goes away, you're wobbly, you're off balance, you're probably going to fall down. And that's people, process, technology. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look at
Very
Cerebral
good. Yeah.
Bullet, there's no software to date that you can just put in there and it's the silver bullet. You need to train
Mm-hmm.
people. You have to even understand we're dealing with people's emotions, people's careers, that you don't want them being resistant to their technology. So you
Yes.
have to
Yes.
approach it from more than the technology itself. And again, 36 years in the business of technology, I see more and more products that are actually really good. Like you could argue right for market. I have people coming to me sometimes saying, "Oh, would you like to be part of this business?" And I'm like, "Great product, probably great. You could, but it's going to require a lot of marketing, etc." The products themselves are not the problem anymore. The technology, it doesn't matter if you have, Databricks or you have Snowflake, if you're dealing with data hubs, they're great. They're all great. Even the AI engines are the same, ChatGPT, Gemini, you could float with any of them. The problem is how you implement it. So specifically sort
Yes.
of a bullet, so you
Yep.
get away from that thinking, is you approach it from what is the business problem that you're trying to solve. So you try
Mm-hmm.
and make
Mm-hmm.
that as micro as possible because you want incremental change in the organization where you can manage people and process. So
Mm-hmm.
that's that's kind of it. I see the AI as an analogy. It's more AI is an accelerant. It's going to expose your broken processes very quickly. So
Right. Right.
what
Good
we
point.
specialize in Locadium is we specialize in building up the data foundations because data, in essence, is what AI is about.
Yes.
It is the everything of AI. So it's forcing companies now to look at their data foundations and fix things that they didn't really have the capacity to spend money in fixing before. But to get to the new order, or whatever you could call it, the new paradigm of work, where it's operational efficiency, cutting down. It's a stressful time to be an executive because you got the pressure from the board saying
Mhm.
enable this AI, but they're also looking at the underlying data foundation saying we're not data enabled, we're not AI enabled yet.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's
And
probably, yeah.
that leads really nicely into the next question that I had for you, which is actually, so you've kind of toyed with this idea that maybe AI failures are really data failures, first of all, which you're probably right about, which is good. And now, what data gaps do you see often happening with clients? Because I mean, it's a data gap, right?
It is a data gap. So it's funny because we go into so many companies and every company we go to, if the employees or the leaders have been there for a long time, sometimes they think it's unique to their organization. We've seen the same script
Hmm.
over and over though,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
it's all those years of not having to make the change over to fixing your data foundations. Now, there's a lot we can go on what a data foundation is. It's not really an intent of the question, but
Yeah.
it's building the foundation. If you look at building a house, you need a foundation first, so the top floors are going to fall down if you don't have your concrete foundation. So when I get to like data, it's really a data failure. Is
Yeah.
best way to do that is to illustrate it. So if you look at a mid-sized corporation and up to a large sales corporation, you typically have anywhere from 185 to 680 applications in that corporate
Hmm.
environment.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
right away, as a technologist, you start thinking, how are those all interconnected? So because they're all bringing in data, sometimes the same
Yeah.
type of data. So you have to
Yeah.
make sense of what is the common, how do we define in the business glossary what that data means so we can use it, we can leverage it. The problem is even further, Charles, is that that's a lot of applications, and you can imagine that. How do you integrate that many so you get the right information coming out? However, it's even more problematic than that. It's estimated 35% of all those applications are what they call shadow IT. And what I mean by definition,
35%. That's
35%.
amazing.
It
Hmm.
is. And when you think of what that means for a company that works with data integration and expected to then fulfill what the
Hmm.
business wants to do, their objective, you're dealing with the problem of captured orphan data because
Hmm.
those are, when I say shadow IT, those are departments. And you saw that with some software. Sometimes software actually markets this way, right to the business rather than going through a
Yes.
common IT central unit. Is that the business will say, we have a need for that, and they'll go out and purchase it. And now that's what you call shadow IT. It's not governed across the board. So lots to talk about that one. That's
Hmm.
probably covers that question enough, though, unless you want to dig deeper on that one.
No, that's good. That's good. That gives us a sense of that data gap, which we talked about, and yeah, I'm actually quite surprised about the how high that figure is, 35% being in the shadow IT area. So
Yeah, it's shocking.
that's crazy, and that definitely characterizes why do we have that data gap. So
Absolutely.
let me jump into a slightly different angle here. Now, a lot of companies think that maybe just launching an internal LLM, so a large language model, the AI of our times, means bingo, they've scaled AI. Ta-da, it's done. It's easy, right?
Yeah.
So what's the difference now between the experimentation phase that I think a lot of companies are going through as they're trying to get this to work and true working enterprise deployments where it's like a structured, here's the approach and they actually make it happen.
Yeah, great question. So anybody can do this, and it actually falls in shadow IT again. In fact, one of the other statistics is how many people are pushing you're working with ChatGPT off the side of their desk to do their email
Ah,
or
yes.
their digital. It's prolific right through organizations right now, and
Yeah.
people are trying to clamp it down, put barriers or enablement while putting governance in it and guardrails, right? So experimentation versus kind of a deployment, a first full scale deployment. So what I'm getting is any company can put a chatbot in anybody, and take these and install it. It's the quality of the outcome that you want from it. And it's so important, as we kind of hinted earlier, is that corporations need decisive information that they can rely on. If there's an
Yeah.
executive going to the board, they can't work with hallucinated data or interpretation
Yes.
of data.
Yeah.
So, but how do you get there is the question. So often, like when we look at AI, we're using what everybody tends to use now, the prompt engines, and ask a question, it delivers it back.
Yeah.
It's working off a wealth of information, and the questions we're asking are that will satisfy it from the sources that are out there on the internet, etc. Within the company, so it's well trained is what I'm getting at, which is another thing about AI that people need to remember is it's a different product altogether. For it to get better, it's trained on being in production. That's
Yes.
much different than products before it. How that relates to corporations that we're getting to as far as experimentation and deployment, like commercial grade, is that you need to take that tool, which is amazing. Like the AI is fantastic. It's incredible. It's
Yeah.
amazing that we've
Yeah.
gotten this far and that we're even going to go further with it. Is that the big word of AI is training it on the data. So you need to figure out where you're going with it, what you want to feed off of it, what's reasonable data to digest. And the difference between you and I using it outside of work or being in a corporate environment is it should be limited on where it's getting that data from that gives you the answer. It shouldn't be doing interpretation and then it becomes a company problem if that is broadcasted as the response, right? So it's really about the difference being that experimental is not going to be trained on data. It's sort of like how if analogy would be when you look at a prototype for a car coming out in 2028, the new Tesla or any other car
Yeah.
model. It's a picture. You don't see under the hood. You don't see that they haven't worked on the suspension or they haven't all the other factors. You wouldn't take it on a cross-country road trip with your family, right? So
Yeah.
you're looking
Yeah.
at just something visually pleasing and you need to train it up. You need to build it up. You need to invest in your AI. It's not just paying the subscription cost. You have to invest into the roadmap of how you're using it and the governance with it.
That's a really good point. And I, I mean, I'm not going to say that everybody's forgetting that, but I think that's an easily overlooked kind of little area that the idea that hey, it's not just a straight out of the box, ta-da, deploy it and it's ready to go. You actually do have to do
Absolutely.
something with it and yeah, work at it and try to refine it. And you're right, putting governance around it. So that kind of leads into the next question, which is so we've talked. I think we got a bit of a good understanding here on the importance of the decisions that are at stake. I mean, because that kind of guides our direction on these type of projects. Probabilistic answers, at the corporate, at the enterprise level, probably not good enough, right? And that's often what is being deployed, which is bringing up a lot of questions. And not surprisingly, I mean, so far, I still have been seeing a lot of studies basically kind of saying that, yeah, you know what, corporations are not getting the ROI that they were expecting out of these. So
Correct.
where does now, in your judgment, where do you see responsible AI kind of fitting into these high impact scenarios and places where we've got high risk that you have to kind of deal with, and it's not just about using ChatGPT to do something.
Yeah, and this is probably my favorite question of all five, to be honest with you.
Uh-huh.
They're all great questions. This one is one I'm very passionate about.
Yes.
And there's a reason we're actually partnered up with Gamma AI because we
Right.
believe in the product. We believe in the future of what we call
Yeah.
human in the loop, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which falls in line with responsible AI. So a few sound bites first that really resonate with me as I keep a pulse on where AI is going. Um,
Mhm.
one frightening thing in a way, I mean, it's also exciting. You see the possibilities, but you got to look at the positive negatives and control the negatives, right? That's all about
Mhm.
governance. Is I read a couple of days ago that, and I've tested it out myself, so I've proven the statistics on a sample size of one when I look internally. Is
Yeah.
if you look at image generation, a lot of people look at images on the internet, if they're on Reddit or
Yeah.
if they're on
Yep.
Instagram, whatever.
Mhm.
They're saying that now, when they did a study, only 1 in 100 people can now detect a real image rather than an AI generated image. It used to
Is
be,
that so?
it is, it's amazingly, Charles, when you and I would look at a picture a year ago, and that's how fast it's moving. A year ago,
Mhm.
you could look around and you might see, oh, the man in the corner has 3 legs. Well, obviously AI, right?
Right. Right.
It's
Of
it's
course. Yes.
amazing how far it's come, where it takes a very trained eye to look for very small nuances. And that's quickly
Mhm.
going away. Like you
Mhm.
can't tell the difference between fact and fiction anymore. So
Yes.
leading that in, so we're dealing with a lot of data. We're not really dealing with image generation.
Yes. Yes.
But it's the same applies to the other thing. It's so convincing what comes out of AI now. Even the way
Mhm.
it speaks is human-like, right? So, oh my God,
That
like
is
it's
very
even
true.
designed to be pleasing. Like it says, "Great question, Adrian." Like it pats me on the back
Yes.
before I even get the answer. But
Absolutely.
it's now the responsible AI part. This is where humans kick in gear, and
Yeah.
this is where I think it's kind of gone off the rails, but we'll quickly get it on the
Mhm.
rails. I firmly believe
Mhm.
in
Mhm. Mhm.
human ability here is that we've kind of given the reins over to the AI, and we don't realize that we're actually the drivers here. Our hands are on the steering wheel. We're the strategists. We're the creative thinkers, and that's how humankind is going to be rising up and benefiting from AI. Is that it gets us out of the mundane, repetitive work, gets us into creative, strategic
Yes.
thinking. That's the value.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how do we create that and have trust in the AI? Because we talked about hallucinations, bad data, encouraging that, oh, the data foundations. What you do is you start creating the environment that promotes that and builds up the trust in what the information coming out of it. So in the case of responsible AI, is what do you have to do? So if you look back at the governance and you had right data, right people for the right people to the right people, the right time. So let's focus on the first one, right data.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
right data is if you look at this, is you control your data then. So I know in the case with Gamma is you're creating collections and you'll have owners of those collections, the owners of the
Mhm.
data. So in
Yes.
that case is a perfect example of saying it's being vetted data. Now the LLM can now like query over and use that data to provide responses, but it's feeding off
Mhm.
vetted data. So that's the
Mhm.
first step,
Yes.
collections
Yes.
data. The second part of that is what they call the human in the loop, which
Yeah.
is right now, if you don't like a response from, say, Gemini or ChatGPT, you're not interacting with a human. It's just
Mhm.
going back to the information saying, oh, Charles
Mhm.
didn't like it. Let's try it a different way.
Mhm.
But the beauty of a human in the loop is that it asks you, it will say, did this satisfy your question? And if you're
Mhm.
saying no, and you say, no, I needed to know more about water quality and or something, whatever your question is, it now associates that back, at least in the model in Cam AI, which I'm really proud to represent, is that it,
Mhm.
it brings it back to who owns that data. And now Samantha gets notified that the question couldn't be answered with the collection of data that's there. Samantha can either have someone she seconds to do it or she can do it herself. She now builds up the model, the collection. And then the
Yeah.
next person come along that has a similar question is going to get a better answer than you got, right? So that's
Yes.
the building up the model of the responsible AI. Now, adding to that is that what we'll see with time, just like anything we buy, is that if you were new to cars, you'd never seen a car before, you'd probably be pretty scared
Yeah.
jumping in a car and going down the street at 60 miles an hour, right?
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. So, but when you've been in it 1,000 times and you realize that out of your 1,000 times, you haven't had an accident or a risk of
Yes.
accident,
Yes.
you're at ease now. You trust it. You believe
Mhm.
that, the
Mhm.
wheels aren't going to come off as you go over a
Mhm.
speed bump or something, right? So you will find that over time AI gets better, the trust goes up. But then I guess a third area is actually this is one I really should emphasize is the traceability and explainability. That's a
Yes.
big
Good
thing
point.
with AI,
Mhm.
and it's missing.
It
You can
is.
change your prompts if you're working with the things like ChatGPT saying, provide me citations, sources. Like, and that's what I encourage people to do. Validate where it's coming from. And
Yes.
occasionally even go to the source and say, did it take it the way what it was meant in the source, right? So I think with time as confidence gets better, and we put the guardrails on it, on the AI through all the data foundational work, et cetera, that we
Mhm.
mentioned. What you'll find is that you don't need to sample it off as that often. Maybe you start off every 3 times you're sampling off saying, did it give an accurate answer? But over time, you're going to bring down that level. The same way you don't walk around your car every time you go to the grocery store and do a safety check.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
manual,
Mhm.
the manual
Yes.
might say you have to do it, but no one does, right?
No,
So
nobody does. Yeah.
but you're going to reduce the number of times you're having to watchdog the AI, but at least we're directing it in the direction we want it to go, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's an optimistic note to kind of end off on, which is good. So, Adrian, thank you so much for joining me and for this, frankly, very practical discussion, bringing the three parts of aligning the governance, data, and responsible AI together. You've kind of helped us bring it all together and kind of give me a cohesive understanding of it. Your perspective on building AI-ready foundations before scaling and, this is super important to organizations, specifically the ones that are looking to go beyond the pilots, because there's lots of pilots out there not necessarily seeing the results yet. So we're seeing, and so this is good advice, good conversation. Thank you for this. And that basically wraps up another episode of Responsible AI in Action. In each conversation, we speak with leaders across the AI industry and those working on enterprise transformation to explore what's actually working. And this was a great example, speaking with Adrian, to say what's actually working out in the field and how should we be doing this. Now, Responsible AI in Action, we do look at what's working, what's not working, and how to deploy AI responsibly in the real world. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Responsible AI in Action.